Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Theravada Buddhism Series, Dhamma Talk number 42. Lokuttara Citta, Supramundane Consciousness. Lokuttara Citta is consciousness that transcends the world of five aggregates. In English is Supramundane Consciousness. Lokuttara Citta has two groups, wholesome and resultant. Wholesome, kusala, resultant, vipaka. Wholesome citta or consciousness is called Magga citta. In English, path consciousness. And resultant citta is called Phala citta. P-H-A-L-A, Phala citta. In English, Fruition consciousness. There is no functional consciousness in this class. Just two, wholesome and resultant, but they have a very specific name called Magga, path, for the wholesome, Phala, fruition, for the resultant. One need to know the distinction between the path, Magga, path consciousness, Magga citta, and factors of path, Magga. They have a different identity. We need to know what each one represents. Magga, path factors, are each of the Eightfold Noble Paths. If you remember noble paths, right view, right thought, right speech, right deed, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, samadhi. Those are the 8 factors, and those 8 factors are called path factors, factors of path, Magga. And the path, just Magga, represent a collective group of the 8 factors. 8 factors altogether collectively is called path. Individually, it's called factors of path. And path consciousness, Magga citta. Path consciousness arises with the 8 factors of enlightenment. They sound very similar to each other, but they are different. Path consciousness function is to eradicate a particular mental defilements at each stage of enlightenment. There are 4 stages of enlightenment. At each stage, the path that belongs to that particular enlightenment eradicates a certain a particular sector of mental defilement. These path consciousness, it disappears, it arises, it disappears, and never arises again once the process is complete. The path consciousness arises, it does its job, it does its function, and it disappears. But this path consciousness is so powerful, it can do the job effectively, efficiently, completely in one moment. So it doesn't have to do the job again. That's why it never needs to arise again. After the path consciousness disappear or passed away, then the Phala, fruition consciousness arises. There are two noble persons. Noble person is Ariya. There are two noble persons at each stage of enlightenment. One reached the first stage of enlightenment. At that level, there are two noble persons. Let's look at the first stage. At the first stage of enlightenment, there is Sotapatti Magga person. Sotapatti Magga person, path person, because path consciousness arises at that moment. That person is called path person, noble person of the path. Only for one moment. And then it's followed by Sotapatti Phala person, fruition person. Because they are two different consciousness. One is a path consciousness, the other is the fruition consciousness. That's why path consciousness gives rise to path person, and the fruition consciousness gives rise to fruition person. But both are at the first level of enlightenment. And that fruition person is there till the next level of enlightenment. Till you achieve the next level of enlightenment, that person is the fruition person of the first enlightenment. The similar principle applies to one's returner, Sakadagami, non-returner, Anagami. That's the second level of enlightenment, third level of enlightenment. And the destroyer of all mental defilements, Arahant, the fourth and final level of enlightenment. So there are 4 stages of enlightenment, and each stage there are 2 noble persons. That's why altogether there are 8 noble persons. So let's go and see each stage of enlightenment. The first stage of enlightenment has the first noble person. That's called Sotapanna. Sotapanna is a first noble person. That person is the one who attained the first path consciousness. When Vipassana insight reaches maturity, a yogi is practicing Vipassana. When the insights, all the insights got mature, then one becomes the first noble person. And that person is called Sotapanna. And the consciousness that person attain is Sotapanna Magga Citta, path consciousness of a Sotapanna. At that moment, one has achieved the first level of enlightenment, Sotapatti Magga, path. So we keep saying this Sotapanna. What does it mean in English? Sotapanna is a combination of two words. One is Sota. Under this context, Sota means stream, and Panna means enterer. That means one who has entered the stream that flows towards Nibbāna. The first time you get the stream, once you got to the stream, all the waters go to the ocean eventually. In the same way, when a person steps into the stream of Dhamma, enter the stream of Dhamma inside, that's why that person is called stream enterer, Sotapanna. And that's the first time any individual who has attained this Magga Citta, path consciousness, it is the first time ever in that person's life, throughout samsara, that person have never experienced that consciousness. This is the first time ever experienced the consciousness. It arises only once, not like other consciousness. They can repeat similar many times, but this one is only once. It arises and it destroys the mental defilement permanently. When this path consciousness destroys mental defilements, it is totally right from the root. Take it out completely, permanently. That mental defilement cannot arise again. That is the power of path consciousness. It arises only once, does its job, and disappear. And that path consciousness take Nibbāna as an object. Okay, consciousness has an object, and path consciousness object is Nibbāna. Immediately after its disappearance, 2 or 3 resultant or fruition consciousness arises. Phala Citta, fruition consciousness arises. Magga consciousness arises, disappear. Immediately following that, Phala consciousness, fruition consciousness arises. That is the particular case when we are reciting about the attributes of Dhamma. It's called akaliko, attribute of Dhamma. What it means is, it gives the result immediately without any delay. Akaliko. That is the point, that is the moment that akaliko, one of the attributes of Dhamma, is presenting. Because if you recall, resultant consciousness in other cases, not here, not in Lokuttara, not in Supramundane, but in Lokiya mundane, this resultant consciousness are the results of wholesome consciousness. One does wholesome consciousness does some kusala, wholesome things, and it give rise to result. But the result comes only in the next life or many lives after. Not in the same life. They are delayed effect. But in this supramundane path consciousness give rise to its result, fruition consciousness, immediately without any space in between. That's a difference of the resultant consciousness or fruition consciousness in this supramundane category. Once you attain that, one can induce fruition consciousness to arise as one wishes. Of course, after some training, you have to train a little bit. But the first time is no training needed. Path consciousness, and then 2 or 3 fruition consciousness. And after that, you can't produce it right away. You train again, just observing vipassana. Within about 3 to 7 days, depending on the person, then you have the ability to induce that fruition consciousness as you wish. And when you induce and stay there, it is called Phala Samapat. You dwell in the state of Phala for a certain period, 1 hour if you wish, 1 day if you wish, up to 7 days you can stay in that state. Phala Samapatti. Just like jhana, once you attain the jhana, you can stay in the jhana for a certain period. And here, Phala, fruition consciousness, you can stay in that for a certain period. You can induce to stay there. Let's say a person have nothing need to be done. They have spare time. Those spare times, they go and dwell in that Phala Samapatti, in the state of fruition consciousness. Now let's go to the second level of enlightenment. The second noble person is Sakadagami, Sakadagami, Sakadagami. In English, once returner. When a stream enterer, the first noble person, practicing vipassana, even though they become a noble person, they still practice vipassana. Practicing vipassana reaches the second stage of enlightenment. When you reach the second stage of enlightenment, that person is called Sakadagami, or once returner. Once returner, path consciousness. Every level have 2 types, path consciousness and fruition consciousness. So this once returner, path consciousness, Sakadagami, Magga, Citta, it arises. That arising is a person become a second noble person. That arising is second level of enlightenment. Second level of enlightenment means that person has this once returner, path consciousness arises. One and the same. That individual is called a Magga person. At that moment of path consciousness, that is the Magga person, path person of the second level of enlightenment. Immediately after that, that consciousness disappears, and then 2 or 3 once returner, fruition consciousness arises. Immediately follow. That is the same pattern. Path consciousness arise, disappear, 2 or 3 fruition consciousness arise and disappear, immediately following. And that fruition consciousness can be induced according to the wish of the noble person anytime after he has trained himself how to, until the next higher path consciousness arises. That individual is called Sakadagami, Phala person, the second noble person. The first noble person two types, path and fruition. Second noble person, two types, path and fruition. The person of the second stage of enlightenment will be reborn in the human world one more time. Once you reach this second stage, that person will be reborn in the human world one more time. That's it, no more than that. That is the reason it is called once returner. Sagadagami in English is once returner, return to the human world one more time. But that person, Sagadagami, if he practice really hard, may reach the end of samsara in that very life, can go to third level and the fourth level and the cessation of mind and matter completely. If not, if that person hasn't finished the job to become a fully enlightened person, will be reborn in the Deva Ram or Brahma Ram. That is the second stage of enlightenment. Third stage of enlightenment, Anagami, Anagami. In English, non-returner. Non-returner is the person who has reached the third stage of enlightenment. Anagami, non-returner. Such person may reach the fourth and final stage of enlightenment in that very life, if one practices hard enough. And if not, will be reborn in one of the 5 pure abodes of Brahma as Anagami. There are 20 Brahma Rams. Out of the 20, 16 are Rupa Brahma Ram, 5 material Brahma. Out of that 16, 5 are designated only for the enlightened person. 5 Brahma Rams, they are called pure abode of Brahma. All the Brahma in those 5 realms are all enlightened. Enlightened to the stage of the Anagami, third level, and they will die and they will reborn in another level of Brahma Ram. And during that time, at one moment, they become Arahant, and then they pass away as an Arahant in the Brahma Ram. 5 pure abode. Only the Brahma with third level or the fourth and final level of enlightenment exists in those realms. So, the final and the fourth level of enlightenment. At the fourth stage of enlightenment, Arahata Magga Citta, path consciousness of Arahant arises. And when it arises, that person is called Arahant. An individual with that consciousness, path consciousness, is called Arahata Magga person, path person, Arahata path person. And after that, path consciousness arises and passes away, immediately followed by 2 or 3 moments of fruition consciousness. And from that moment onward, that person is called Arahant. Only then it's called Arahant. At the moment of path is simply eradicating mental defilements. And in Phala, you are fully endowed with all that one needs. Once you attain the path consciousness, From that moment, that person is Arahant. One may reach Arahantship in this life. A yogi practice and go through all levels and become Arahant. Or one may attain the final stage of enlightenment in one of the pure abodes of Brahma. We had explained in the Anagami already. Anagami, non-returner. Non-returner means those individuals never return to the sensuous realm. They don't come back down to Deva or human. They never return to the sense sphere. That's why it is called non-returner. Arahant. The meaning of Arahant is being presented by the elders based on the language in many ways. One is worthy to accept gifts. Arahant means a person who is worthy to accept gifts. What it really mean is, if any one of us go and offer something, give something to an Arahant, you accumulate an enormous amount of kusala, merit. Some cases you will even fulfill your wishes. Definitely silent Buddhas, they can fulfill your wishes. It is not that they do, it is the purity. The purity of mind is so pristine that it vibrates anything that come in touch. As there are Arahata part consciousness and Fruition consciousness. Every level there are two types, part consciousness and Fruition consciousness. Of course, in the Arahant too, there are two noble persons. 4 enlightenments, 2 in each, so altogether 8 noble persons. Arahant is the destroyer of the enemy. What it means is the destroyer of the mental defilements. Arahant. And one of the attributes of Buddha is also Arahant, which means one who has completely uprooted all types of mental defilements without leaving any trace behind. So, those are the 8 noble persons at 4 levels of enlightenment. 8 noble persons corresponds with the 8 types of consciousness. Lokuttara Citta. May all of you be able to practice mindfulness insight meditation and attain the first part consciousness as soon as possible. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much.